I'm Jennifer, and
I'm Katie.
And we're both from the Adult Services Department here at the Worcester branch of the Wayne County Public Library. And today we would like to introduce you to a new video series that we're calling The Listening Librarians. Now, Katie and I have talked a lot in the office about different audiobooks that we have read recently. And we thought it would be really fun to get together and share some of those with you. So I thought first we could start off with how each of us came to listening to audiobooks. So Katie, how about you tell us your story?
So I actually was set to attend a conference in Baltimore back in 2017, and I was going to drive, and I knew that I would drive myself crazy if I spent the entire time just changing the radio stations. So kind of last minute, I stopped by my local public library and I just grabbed an audiobook. I don't even know if I necessarily really read more than the title. And it turned out it was Water for Elephants. And that is by Sarah Gruen. And it was narrated fantastically by David Ledoux and John Randolph Jones. So they both take the role of Jacob Jankowski, who's the main character. And Jacob is older, telling his story in a nursing home, and then it goes into younger Jacob. And it was just a really fun story. It's actually won quite a few audiobook awards. So that came out in 2007. And so it was perfect for me driving to Baltimore. And it's just a great story about how Jacob joined the circus as a veterinarian and literally carries the water for the elephants. And along the way, he falls in love with Rosie, who's the girl who rides the elephants for the circus, and kind of their relationship and how it grows.
And I came into audiobooks really late. Last year, during the pandemic, in the early days, of course, all of our interlibrary loan had shut down, and I was able to get plenty of books from our library, but I was really kind of craving something else, and so I finally decided I'm ready to download Libby onto my phone and try some e-audiobooks that way, and very slowly began to get hooked. I started off with a couple of YA books. One of the first ones was actually a middle grade book, which was Front Desk by Kelly Yang, a story of Mia and her parents who had immigrated from China to Southern California and were managing a motel, and some of what they had to deal with there between some of the prejudice against immigrants, but then just fitting into American culture. And it was just so beautifully narrated that I was really caught up in the story. But since then, I've gone much more into the audiobooks because I find it's really easy to take that along when I'm walking or to have that going while I'm cooking and to still be reading at times when I normally wouldn't.
No, I totally understand that. I have a bit of a drive to get here to work, so pretty much every day I have an audiobook on in the car going to and from work, and I've gotten through a lot of books this year with my long drive. So you mentioned Libby before as something that you like to use. I really like to use Hoopla. So my first audiobook I got on CD, and I will admit, having to change the CDs in and out while I was driving felt a little dangerous. So now I use Hoopla a lot, and it is an app, but you can also use it through a website that we offer here through the Wayne County Public Library. And it's great. It has not just audiobooks, but also ebooks and TV shows and movies. And it allows you to instantly download any of those items, and you get them for 21 days. And you can have 15 items out in a month, I feel like. So I usually use all 15 of those on audiobooks and the occasional CD, because there's music on there too.
And like I said, I'm using Libby, which connects to Overdrive, which is our other ebook and e-audiobook resource. I honestly don't know right offhand how many checkouts and holds you can have on that. I've not maxed it out. But I only upgraded to a newer phone with much more storage this year, so I'm just now getting to the point where maybe I'll have 4 audiobooks on my phone at one time, but I don't really push it more than that. So another thing we wanted to share with you all today is some of our favorite books from the past year, or things that we've read recently that we really have enjoyed. So I'll go first. One of the, actually 2 of the audiobooks that I really loved this year, and I'm saying 2 because I'm pairing them together. It's not really first book and sequel, but it sort of is. It's the teen book, the first one, Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe, and that one came out in 2012. The second one just came out a couple of months ago, I think like late summer 2021, and that's Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World. Both of them are written by Benjamin Alire-Sáenz, and they're both narrated by Lin-Manuel Miranda, who you may know from Hamilton, Moana, In the Heights. It's really, both of them are excellent retellings of these 2 stories. Aristotle and Dante are both young men, Latinx young men, Catholic. They're going to 2 different schools, but they're both about the same age in high school. And Ari has had kind of a rough life. His brother's in jail. His dad had been in Vietnam. I should say this takes place in like the early 80s.
And the author, actually, I read an interview with him, I'll cut in. He said that he said it in the 80s because he didn't want to have to write in texting and cell phones into the story.
Yeah, I could see that. Because their communication really is a lot of hanging out in person. But then in the second book, Ari does a lot of writing letters to Dante, just trying to express how he feels as he's growing up and dealing with all the different things in his life. I don't want to get too much into the plot of both of the books, but they're really good coming-of-age stories for 2 young men in their particular area of the country, and given some of their difficulties that they have with family situation and their own personal growth. But the narration by Lin-Manuel Miranda is just wonderful. You really get a sense of the different characters. Dante especially has a slightly higher pitched voice, but he's very perky. He's just a really engaging character. And he tells the story with such tenderness that it's very moving to listen to both of them. The second book especially, there were a couple of times I just had to stop and go off and cry because it was so moving. It was so beautiful. But those really hit the top of my list this year.
So one of the audiobooks that I listened to this year that I really enjoyed, I actually read / listened to just about a month ago, and that's Forest of Souls by Lori M. Lee. And then I actually listened to the audiobook of the second in this series immediately after. The sequel is called Broken Web, and that's relatively new. It came out in 2020. So both of those were narrated by Cindy Kay, and they follow the story of Saoirse. Saoirse's training essentially to be a spy for her queen. And in the midst of this training, her best friend is attacked and almost killed. And then all of a sudden, Saoirse is able to, has these magical powers and is able to heal her. But unfortunate for Saoirse, the queen typically executes all the magic users in the kingdom, and she is given sanctuary with another king called Ronan, but he's also a little tricky. It was a really fascinating series of books, and I'm super excited for the third book. It's supposed to come out in 2022. And I'm hoping it is also narrated by Cindy Kay. She's done a great job. I've actually, it turns out, I didn't realize, listened to a couple of books that Cindy Kay has narrated. And she just really brings the characters to life. And if you've never listened to an audiobook, sometimes the narrators can really make or break your listening experience. And she does a great job. Everybody's getting a slightly different voice. Her male voices actually sound decently male. I just thought they were fabulous.
The one thing I would add to those books, I read those in paper. One little content warning, spiders.
Yeah. Ronan is the Spider King.
Yeah.
So
another person in our department, Kimberly, suggested the book to me, and when I got to that part, I'm afraid I came into the office. It was like, you didn't tell me there were spiders.
There's also evil trees, but
I can deal with the evil trees. The other book I would like to mention, this is one that came out very early in 2021, and I read it in paper first, really loved it, and then went to listen to it again, or read it again on audio. And that is the Afrofuturist novella Remote Control by the author Nnedi Okorafor. Now this one, it's set in Nigeria in an indeterminate future, and the main character is Sankofa, who as a child has this experience with both this tree that's outside in the backyard of her family home, but also like these little seeds that come from the sky. And it turns out that what has happened is she has somehow absorbed this alien presence. And she discovers one day that when she gets very upset, she kind of emits this green glow that then kills living things or it'll even destroy technology. So she starts off with this one really upsetting incident where she uncontrollably spreads this green glow and kills everybody in her town. And has to then find a way to get to another town. And the first car she gets into, she pretty much kills the car. So it's a really harrowing journey for her as she tries to, find a way to survive, but then also find out what's going on. And like I said, I really loved the book, but when I found out who the narrator was for the audiobook, that's when I had to go ahead and listen to that, because the narrator for it is the British actress Adjoa Andoh. And if you have seen the Bridgerton series on Netflix, you might know her as Lady Danbury. So she narrates it with this very posh British accent, but she also does all of the West African accents and the different, male, female, older, younger characters just beautifully. And it just gets you right into the story. She really captures the feel of the different areas and the culture and everything about it. And I just zipped through the audiobook about as quickly as I did the paper copy, and I'll probably go back and listen to it again sometime because it was so good.
I was going to say, too, audiobooks that take place in maybe a country or involving a language that you don't know, I always love listening to them because then I know how to pronounce things.
Yes.
So I made that connection.
Good thing to remember.
So another audiobook that I really enjoyed this year, shout out to nonfiction this time, was Not My Father's Son. It's by the actor Alan Cumming, and it's actually narrated by him. So it came out in 2015, and it feels like he's talking to you while you listen to the audiobook. And he is such a charming, delightful actor. And so the book focuses on his journey. He was going to be on a BBC show where they trace your ancestry, and he had told the BBC that he knew very little about his grandfather, so his mom's dad, who had been in World War II and then came home, but then kind of disappeared from everyone's lives. So, what happened to his grandpa? But in the process of going through that with the BBC, his father, who he's not had a great relationship with, and he goes into, some of the trauma of his childhood and what it was like for him to grow up with his brother and both of his parents. His dad finds out he's going to be doing this show, and he calls and he says, well, I wasn't going to tell you until I was dead, but you're not actually my son. And so Alan goes through this sort of existential crisis, like, who am I? Is he my dad? Is he not? And so then there's DNA tests, and I'm not going to give anything away. But it was a really good story, touching at times. And like I said, with him narrating his own story, it really feels like he's just sitting next to you, telling you what happened. And you kind of, get this sentimental journey that you get to go on with him.
Well, we could probably go on about a lot of different books that we've read this year, but we'll stop there with our favorites or really memorable ones from 2021. But the one thing I would like to add is that if you're into listening to stories and books, along with Libby and Hoopla, you might think about getting kind of a quicker fix in listening to stories by listening to the podcast LeVar Burton Reads. Now, if you grew up in, 80s, 90s, somewhere in there, you might remember LeVar Burton from doing Reading Rainbow.
Which is coming back.
I've heard that, yeah. And this is more of a podcast for adults. He picks a lot of different short stories from some of his favorite authors or stories that just really resonate with him, and adds in a little bit of music, does the voices. And again, you really get a sense of the different characters, the different cultures, sometimes different languages, where he and his producer will do the research on how to pronounce things properly.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, it's just a real treat to listen to those. And those are usually in about 45 minutes to an hour segments. So you can look for that on your phone if you've got Google Podcasts, or find it in your Apple Store, whatever. I'm pretty sure it's a free podcast. It's a fun one to look at.
And we will be back next month with Listening Librarians, where we will be talking about some more audiobooks.
Yeah, we're going to try and come up with a different theme each month, and you can look forward to finding some new reads and new listens with us. So until next month, happy listening!